Time to light the match for the burning truth with Casey Hendrickson.
And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to The Burning Truth. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson. Want to thank R&B Car Company, locations in South Bend, Warsaw, and Fort Wayne. Go to rbcarcompany.com. Today is the last day to register to vote if you're in Indiana. If you are in Michigan, you can register all the way up to the day of the election and a week after. They will even backtrack your vote for you. They'll even add like 3 or 4 different ballots that you have cast if you're in Michigan, as long as you're with the right party. Casey, you're lying to me. Well, I mean, I hate to break the news to you, but 4 Michiganders were just charged with voting twice. Which is weird. I'm told that it doesn't happen. They announced this on Friday, by the way. So, yep. Yeah, you got 4 people voted twice in Indiana. Or, excuse me, Michigan, sorry. I'm checking out already. 4 people in Michigan have been charged with voting twice. That was announced on Friday. So, there you go. I'm joking, not joking. Now, if you didn't get to the election office, you can still go online. As long as it's on the 7th, you're good. If it's in the mail, as long as it's postmarked today, you're good. Okay? So you have to do it that way. But if you're in Indiana and you need to register, you need to go ahead and do that. You can also go to indianavoters.in.gov. You can check your registration status and register there. Okie dokie. How screwed up is America? Joe Biden has promoted Karine Jean-Pierre to be his senior advisor. We all joked, we all laughed, but that's not a fake news headline. That's a real thing. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has been promoted to senior advisor to the former vice president, according to ABC News. The guy is leaving in a month. Well, okay, no, the election is in a month. He's leaving in a couple of months. Okay. Wow. Speaking of doofuses, let's talk about Kamala for just a second. So Kamala has a bunch of social media accounts. And they're all designed to like push her narrative and everything else, right? Now, if I were to tell you Susan Collins slammed Donald Trump, some of you would be like, well, that's par for the course for Susan Collins. Susan Collins is a Republican senator, but she's a turncoat. She really isn't a Republican, right? But what if I told you that that wasn't the right Collins? Just bear with me for a second. There's a social media account, Kamala Wins. That is what the account is. Kamala Wins. Okay? And it's keeping score of Kamala Harris's wins, the largest online community supporting soon-to-be President Kamala Harris. They have 769,000 followers. That's almost as many dates as your mom had before she met your dad. That's a lot of people. 769,000 people follow this account. Okay. Just bear with me. You'd think by now, someone they actually trust would have told them that the woman they think is Susan Collins, the one that they're having a conniption over, is actually Caitlin Collins, a CNN pundit who is very much on board with Kamala Harris. A woman that we'd very much expect to slam Trump to earn points for Kamala Harris. Now, the post is this. Republican Senator Susan Collins just slammed Donald Trump for his lies surrounding FEMA cutting funds for illegal immigrants. That's not what's being alleged, but I digress. Retweet to make sure all Americans know that even Republicans are calling BS on Trump's claims. That has been liked over 34,000 times. Just so we are clear, Now, this was posted on October 4th, so 3 days ago. It has been seen by 1 million people. It has been reposted 18,000 times. That is enough to sway entire elections. The problem is that it isn't Republican Senator Susan Collins. It is Caitlin Collins, who works for CNN. I don't know. I honestly don't know what to say. I truly, honestly don't. I mean, there's a good chance that if this account is affiliated with Kamala, as some people believe it is, there's a good chance that it's just a, dumb kid who works for them. I don't know. I would be willing to bet that it's probably a foreign intelligence operation, and that at Harris_wins or Kamala wins, which has a blue check mark on it, which just means you paid for the blue check mark. That is probably a foreign influence peddling operation, and that could explain how they don't know the difference between Susan Collins and Caitlin Collins. But it is important that you all know that the people pushing for all of this is completely out of step with everything. And then we have a very intriguing story, and this one, this is a bit different, and I kind of wanted to cover this because this is, I don't know how I feel about this, and I'm trying to put myself in the position of this family, and I don't know that I would be able to put myself in the position of this family. But there's a girl who was murdered in 2006. And she was a high school girl. Her name is Jennifer Ann Crescente. And tragically was killed in 2006. Now, what happened is an AI chatbot has been created with this girl's likeness, using her voice. But she's dead. It had been 18 years since Jennifer Ann, a high school senior and Crescente's only child, was murdered by her ex-boyfriend in Austin. Grieving, Crescente had started a nonprofit in her name, working since 2006 to raise awareness for teenage dating violence. But Crescente now learned that she'd reappeared online, this time as an artificial intelligence chatbot on Character.ai, which is run by a San Francisco-based startup that struck a $2.7 billion deal with Google back in August. A wave of emotions struck Crescente: fury, confusion, disgust, all at once. Part of it was sorrow, he said, because here I am having to once again be confronted with this terrible trauma that I've had to deal with for a long time. He had no idea who created the chatbot or when it was made. He only knew that Google had indexed the bot that morning and sent him the alert at 4:30 a.m., which he had set up to keep track of any mention of his daughter or his nonprofit. Now, if you do Google alerts, you can set up an alert for any search term, including like a name. And Google will send you an email every time something is published and crawled by their search engine for that name. So he set up an alert for the fund that he created in his daughter's name and his daughter's name. So Google sent the alert, and he now found out that his daughter, who was murdered in 2006, has been recreated as a chatbot on Character.ai. Now, they're typically created by users on that website who can upload names, photos, greetings, and other information about the persona. In Jennifer Ann's case, the bot used her name and yearbook photo, describing her as a knowledgeable and friendly AI character who can provide information on a wide range of topics. Now, by the time Crescente discovered the bot, a counter on its profile showed that it had already been used in at least 69 different chats, according to a screenshot. Now, the website also listed Jennifer Ann as an expert in journalism with expertise in video game news. Now, her uncle, Brian Crescente, founded the game news site Kotaku and co-founded its competitor site, Polygon. I didn't realize that. Okay, so we've got some, that's Polygon's big news. Drew Crescente said that he contacted Character.ai through its customer support form, asking the company to remove the chatbot mimicking Jennifer Ann and to retain all data on who uploaded the profile. He says he wanted to make sure that they put measures in place so that no other account using his daughter's name or his daughter's likeness could be created in the future. He received an automated response containing his case number, but no further information. Naturally, the family is involved in this, and they're all pretty upset. But this leads to like an ethical thing, right? We live in the digital age now. And even people who didn't live in the digital age can still be recreated after they pass away as some kind of a chatbot, which might be appealing to some, and of course might be repugnant to others. This is the reality of how we exist right now, and what rights your likeness has, if any, when you pass away, to not be resurrected as some artificial intelligence apparatus on some website or some app or some game or something of that nature. But the bot was finally removed after one of the relatives tweeted angrily to Character.ai on social media. So they responded to the social media post, Morgan. They didn't respond to the direct email from the family. They said that it violated the firm's policies on impersonating others. But since then, they've gotten nothing from silence from the company other than they deleted the bot. I guess this raises a bunch of other ethical questions about what to do with people who have passed away regarding artificial intelligence. And there's going to be others, by the way, who want to recreate their loved one. We've seen a lot of Hollywood movies and short stories and science fiction and things like that about this, but I don't know that anybody actually fully realized how possible it is. This is a girl who passed away in 2006. What happens with somebody who passes away now? Especially somebody in, the media. Somebody might upload my likeness into a left-wing chatbot, Morgan. Could you imagine? The horror. It raises some serious ethical questions, something we got to think about as a society, and even with our laws. It's something that we definitely have to think about. They got more coming up. You're listening to The Burning Truth. Trying to figure out how I troll this guy who lit himself on fire protesting Israel. The journalist who worked for CBS News. I think I've got a couple of really good ideas. I might make him an emote on the Rumble channel. I might very well just do that. Do I make him animated, though? I think I got to make him animated, right? There's flames involved, right, Morgan? Got to make him animated. We'll figure something out, folks. Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning into The Burning Truth. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson, btmedia.news for podcasts. Almost completely caught up on the podcast. So close. The Dinesh D'Souza podcast will be up here in the next 24 hours. And I know a lot of people were requesting that who missed the interview. And you can sign up for the free newsletter, the daily show prep, which includes links to all of the stuff that we discussed on the show that day, and tons more coming soon. Indiana Secretary of State Diego Morales has claimed that more than 90% of eligible Hoosiers are registered to vote in the November election is being questioned by voter advocacy groups. And we talked about this one last week, and I was like, that's a really high rate. It is a high rate because turnout is so low. Now, turnout can be low even if people are registered because people don't assume that, there's going to have any sway in the election. That's always a possibility. In a press release issued last week, Morales said that more than 4.7 million Hoosiers, about 90.7% of those eligible, are registered to vote. He also touted his administration's work to promote voter registration by having blanketed the state in voter registration efforts, which is true. They did. It was all over the place. And encourage eligible Hoosiers to register. However, nonprofit voter advocacy organizations say the true number of eligible voters in Indiana who are registered is much lower. Okay, so they're saying that number is inflated because the state does a horrible job of routine voter list maintenance. That's Julie Vaughn, Executive Director of Common Cause Indiana. And it's hard to say what the number is because we don't know how much of that, meaning the voter rolls, are bad names and they're people who have moved or should have been deleted. Okay. Well, I guess there's two things. One, they're saying that they don't believe Diego Morales' numbers, and they don't believe the numbers because they're not sure that Indiana's done a good enough job of basically curing the voter rolls, but at the same time, they admit that they don't know. So I guess the technical answer is we really don't know. We hope that that's the case. But then I would also kind of come back with, hey, let's routinely clear the voter rolls and force everybody to re-register, which I think we should do on a national level anyway. I think if you take every 8 years, you run through the presidential elections, you skip every second presidential election. After that one, like the moment that 8-year election is done, you purge everything and you force everybody to re-register. So anybody who's dead, guess what they can't do, Morgan? They can't re-register. Everybody's incarcerated. Guess what they can't do, Morgan? They can't re-register. People who have moved out of state will register with their new state, and their old registration can't be used by people like they do in Michigan, and that sort of thing. And then if you don't re-register, well, I guess you didn't care all that much, and you didn't really want to vote. That's what I think we should do. So what the truth is, I don't know. I honestly have no idea which one of these answers is correct. Secretary of State wants it to be over 90%. Of course, voter turnout doesn't necessarily mean anything when you look at the number of people who are actually, registered. But at the same time, advocacy groups doubt the number, but they don't have any actual proof that the number is wrong. So I honestly don't know. The only way to figure this all out, frankly, is to purge the whole thing and start over from scratch. And we should do that everywhere in the United States. Anybody who actually takes election integrity seriously would probably agree with that, although they might disagree on the particulars of how to do it. But I think the only way to do this is to purge and start over. We got more coming up. You're tuned in to The Burning Truth.
The Burning Truth with Casey Hendrickson.
Oh, look at that. ChatGPT is helping me out with ideas on how I can use the guy who lit himself on fire to protest Israel to make that thumbnail better. Hey, one of the recommendations, Morgan, was to use motion effects, just like I had talked about with the flames. Very interesting. They got 8 suggestions. Oh. I thought that they were going to tell me no because I specifically said I'm using an image of a guy who lit himself on fire. I figured ChatGPT would be like, no, can't help you with that one. Turns out they will. So that's cool. NBC News is not happy with Notre Dame Law School. For those of you in the South Bend area, this is NBC News' Lawrence Hurley, tucked within a Gothic-style building on campus. Really? Do we need to do this descriptor stuff? Is that how we need to start this off? Like, it's you have nothing better to do with your time? Like, is that... Tucked within a Gothic-style building on campus in this small town is a Catholic institution increasingly exerting conservative influence on the Supreme Court, the University of Notre Dame Law School. Okay, Lawrence, let me educate you a little bit. The Notre Dame University campus is Catholic in name only. And nobody would ever describe the University of Notre Dame or its law school as conservative. So I don't really know what is up your keister. Now, Amy Coney Barrett, of course, is from the University of Notre Dame. She is local to people around South Bend. They know Amy Coney Barrett. The school counts among its former faculty Justice Amy Coney Barrett. who swapped the faux medieval halls of one institution for the neoclassical marble columns of another in helping form the 6-3 conservative majority on the court. There isn't a 6-3 conservative majority. There is a 4-3 with 2 swing votes. But I digress. In a trend that started before Barrett's appointment, but has accelerated since, the school is now having success placing both students and professors in prestigious Supreme Court clerkships. Well, okay. Now, for those of you who don't know, like, Notre Dame's law school is kind of renowned. Morgan, you knew that, right? Yeah. Like, people probably should know that. So they're renowned. And yes, you have a faculty member now on the Supreme Court. That is probably going to open the door for some of the students there to get, appointments there. That's certainly going to help. The clerks serve 1-year terms and play a low-profile but crucial role in advising their bosses on which cases to take up and how to rule on them. They do research, help craft decisions, and serve as sounding boards for the justices. Yeah, okay, whatever. The nation's elite law schools, particularly Harvard and Yale, have dominated, filling clerkships at the Supreme Court and educating the lawyers who went on to be nominated to the court for decades. Now, keep that in mind, please. In the competition for students and prestige, law schools have worked to propel their students into clerk jobs. Conservative criticism of academia, particularly targeting the nation's elite universities, has grown, presenting an opening for more conservative-minded schools to gain prominence with a more conservative court. Okay, everybody in South Bend is laughing their backsides off because, again, Notre Dame is not a more conservative-minded school. But NBC News thinks that they are, which is hysterical. Now, what I find funny about this is they admit that this has basically been the strategy for Harvard and Yale. But now that Notre Dame is doing it, they're mad. Because how dare you interrupt the Harvard and Yale basic monopolies? I know it's 2. It's not a monopoly. You know what I mean. Hiring clerks from law schools steeped in the prevailing conservative thinking known as originalism. That is... Folks, that's not Notre Dame. Maybe in the law school more so than the rest of the campus. I don't know. But that's not Notre Dame. So they are really upset that Notre Dame students are getting an opportunity to actually clerk for the Supreme Court because those are jobs that Harvard and Yale should have for their students, and their students are, liberal and don't like the Constitution. There's a whole thing about, this is a giant write-up. It is this thing is how many pages long? I don't know. Oh, my word. Scientists have filed a lawsuit after a publisher has retracted papers on the dangers of the abortion pill. I haven't really weighed in on this, and I probably should have. I know a lot of you wanted me to. A group of researchers has initiated a legal case against a publisher that retracted several studies on abortion pill risks, claiming that the studies were removed due to political motivations. 10 researchers from the pro-life Charlotte Lozier Institute initiated legal proceedings against Sage Publishing, alleging that Sage violated contract laws in California when the journal withdrew 3 studies, including 2 regarding abortion pill risks earlier this year. I don't know how many of you are aware of this. I don't care what your stance is on the issue. Abortion pills have great risk. And we have a young woman who died as a result of taking one that the left then tried to blame on anti-abortion activists, which is pretty grotesque. The lawsuit aims to prompt Sage to enter arbitration regarding these retractions, which were implemented in February. Dr. James Studnicki, Vice President and Director of Data and Analytics at the Institute, asserted that the retractions damaged the authors' reputations and contravened scientific publication ethics. Sage's official retraction notice mentioned that an independent review was triggered by a reader's complaint alleging misleading data and the author's affiliations with the pro-life group. Okay? None of that matters unless, of course, you can prove that the data was wrong. Now, I know that this is going to come as a shock to many of you out there. Most of your scientific studies are funded by a group that wants a specific result. That's how it works in this country, and that's why the clinical trials are super important. Dr. Studnicki, who was also removed from the editorial board of SAGE's Health Services Research and Managerial Epidemiology Journal months before the retractions, criticized SAGE's actions as politically motivated. One of the challenge studies published in November of 2021 cited a 500% increase in emergency room visits linked to chemical abortions between 2002 and 2015. Now, that is based on Medicaid data. Another study from May of 2022 examined repeated ER visits among women who did not inform their physicians of undergoing chemical abortions. These studies were referenced in federal court decisions about the FDA's approval suspension for, is it mifepristone? I guess how you say it. So abortion pill dangers again highlighted last month when Kamala Harris falsely claimed that a woman in Georgia died due to an abortion ban, but was actually killed as a result of using that chemical abortion pill. Now, the retractions, this is important. The retractions don't appear to be rooted in any science. There doesn't appear to be a rebuttal of the findings. And many times during COVID, we saw this as well, where the journals would admit that they retracted the studies, not because there was inherently a problem with the study's results, but because the study's results might hinder more people getting COVID vaccines, etc., even though the study might have been accurate. So this has been highly politicized for a number of years, obviously. So it'll be interesting to see how this lawsuit kind of pairs out, considering there doesn't appear to be any serious scientific rebuttal of the study's findings. You got more coming up. You're tuned into The Burning Truth. I was talking so much about the FEMA stuff in the first hour. I didn't want to do too much on the horrible weekend that Kamala and Tim Walz had for their interviews. I don't know how many of you are paying attention to that, but it was not a good weekend for them. Not at all. So let's just take a couple of minutes, cue my audio. Tim Walz actually did Fox News. He went on with Shannon Bream. Shannon Bream is, well, she's about as nice and polite as you're going to get, but she asks real questions. And she did. So let's take a look at Tim Walz and see how he did.
Our latest polling shows that 66% of Americans we talked to said that buying groceries is a, quote, major problem for them. And when we ask people about how they feel about the policies of this administration versus the previous, double the amount of people surveyed say that Biden-Harris policies have hurt them rather than help them and their families economically. That's in stark contrast to how they feel when asked about the Trump administration. So what would a Harris-Walz administration do different than a Biden-Harris administration when it comes to convincing people that the economy is going to get better for them, because their perception is that it's not?
Well, we saw a blockbuster jobs report this week. We saw interest rates come down, and we've also seen that Vice President Harris laying out a middle-class agenda.
None of that answers the question. None of that answers the question. They've been asked this question for months now. Okay, so then he was confronted about abortion. Let's see how he answered that.
Okay, let's clarify more changes that you signed in Minnesota as well. Several things were repealed with respect to reporting infants who may have survived an abortion attempt. Language that used to be part of the statute was taken out. We'll put this on the screen so people can see. It used to require medical personnel to, quote, preserve the life and health of the born alive infant. That language has been repealed. It's no longer part of the law. Also struck from the law was language about reporting infants that are born alive, what treatment they receive, and whether they live or die. Why was it important to you to get that protection out of the law?
Yeah. Good question.
Minnesota law aligns with every other case of what physicians are required by their ethical responsibilities. And so it changed nothing other than aligning with all care that physicians provide in any circumstance for any medical case. Okay. And so it's alignment, as it's always been. It's the cases we've seen in Minnesota. The outcomes we get in our healthcare results are the best in the nation. And all it did was align with existing law.
But you do acknowledge it takes out the language about preserving the life of an infant who was born alive.
Every doctor has an ethical responsibility to provide what they can in each situation. That is the way the law is written now. It's the same for any person who shows up.
No, it's not, because again, we got the Virginia stuff. Now, let me just ask you a question for you Democrats who actually think that was an answer. If Tim Walz's position is that changed nothing, then why was it important to remove it? If it didn't change anything, why was it important to remove it? Because it changed something, didn't it? Of course it did. Okay. Well, let's talk about Amber Thurman then.
I want to clarify what the law is there in Minnesota. Abortion Finder, a website that helps women find access, says abortion is legal throughout pregnancy in Minnesota. There is no ban or limit on abortion in Minnesota based on how far along in a pregnancy you are. You signed the bill that makes it legal through all 9 months. Is that a position you think Democrats should advocate for nationally?
Good question.
Look, the vice president and I have been clear. The restoration of Roe versus Wade is what we're asking for.
But that law goes far beyond Roe v. Wade.
To make her own choice. The law is very clear. It does not change that. That was been debunked on every occasion.
It wasn't debunked, and it doesn't change that. And Roe v. Wade doesn't set those limits.
But wait. Let's agree. What you signed is there's not a single limit through 9 months of pregnancy. Roe had a trimester framework that did have limits through the pregnancy. The Minnesota law does not have that.
This puts the decision with the woman and her healthcare providers. The situation we have is when you don't have the ability of healthcare providers to provide that, that's where you end up with a situation like Amanda Zaworski in Texas, where they are afraid to do what's necessary. This doesn't change anything. It puts the decision back on to the woman, to the physicians, and we know that this is simply something to be brought up to be very clear. Donald Trump's asking for a nationwide abortion ban.
He's not. He specifically said that he wouldn't sign one.
He has said that he has said repeatedly that he will not sign a national abortion ban. Are you calling that just, it's a flat out lie?
Yes, of course. And
he's saying it's a lie without any evidence.
In the past said so too. Now look, they may see this as an election issue. We see it as a right of women to make their own bodily decisions. And that's what the states like my state have the ability to put that in. States like Georgia force women to cross the border, and then we have a death of Amber Thurman. So let's be very clear. Trying to cut hairs on an issue on this is not where the American public's at. They want the restoration of Roe versus Wade. Vice President Harris said she would sign it. That's what we'll do when we're elected.
But to be clear, the Minnesota law is far beyond Roe v. Wade. And about the Amber Thurman case in Georgia, her family has, and it's tragic, she is a young mother who left behind a young son. But what her family has said is it was a complication from an abortion pill that she received, and she didn't get proper care when she went to a Georgia hospital, which had multiple opportunities to intervene there. Her own attorney, the family's attorney, says it wasn't the Georgia law, it was the hospitals. What he claims is malpractice, not treating her when she clearly showed up in distress and still had the byproducts of her pregnancy because of that rare complication from the abortion pill. So just.
And that's why they don't go on Fox News. Because it was not a good day for him. And you notice he didn't answer the question again. Folks, have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 o'clock, btmedia.news.
Podcasts by Federated Media.